Psycho Bummer presents Cybum 003, the Paula EP by Quad. Featuring for rough and drunk Commodore Amiga chip Bluetooth. All crunched out on the Paula sound chip for your 8-bit pleasure.
Yes, what's going on, crew? Hope you're all doing well, and thanks for checking out the vid. First and foremost, huge shouts to Psycho Bummer for pressing up this EP. I am so happy with this release, and the final product is just so well thought out, and I'm so happy to have a four-tracker of Amiga tunes out on. So links below in the description for where to buy the EP on vinyl and also digital. I reckon a lot of folks either stumbled upon this algorithmically by just being fans of drum and bass or through Instagram, and for that reason this video is going to be sort of a director's commentary, I guess, and a breakdown of some of the techniques and commands inside of OctaMED, catering to more of like a newbie's exposure to old trackers, and in particular maybe someone who has emulated OctaMED or is using Nuys but is wanting to learn more of the peculiarities of the Amiga trackers, without this being a full-blown tutorial video, of course, which there are plenty of good ones on YouTube already, a la Solox and Busy Bee. And I don't claim to be an Amiga expert, so if anyone has some really cool commands that I am overlooking, please feel free to comment below. And as stated above, a lot of this info in the video is intended for the novice and might be very obvious to the seasoned Amiga. Anyway, let's jump right into it, starting off with the A1 track here entitled King Russ, named after the smooth jazz god Russ Freeman and the Rippingtons. This track ripping that main melody from a tune of theirs. This tune is also one of the earliest Amiga meds I made, hence the super crusty samples, all recorded into the Amiga via TechnoSound Turbo 2 at the default, 13964 hertz, which at the time, the reason I did that was because the hard disk that was installed on my 1200 was small and old, and I didn't really know how much data each of the samples contained, so basically I was just trying to conserve, I guess. Turns out IFF files are incredibly small, so storage isn't the issue, especially now that I replaced that disk with a CF card, but now that I record almost all the samples at 20,384 hertz, I run out of RAM fast, like really fast, and sometimes my Amiga will actually just prevent me from loading any more samples into RAM during writing, and so I have to get creative with that shit. And so I think the moral of the story is try and keep your samples short and only record the really essential stuff at the higher frequencies like drums and stuff. Unless you like everything to be crunchy, then by all means. But anyways, going into the tune, it was a real chore to get that main melody lined up correctly. As you can see it in block 6, track 2 is the main track holding that sample, and I've got to start it on line 1 after the block begins because it just didn't sound right cutting it off early. But But now that I'm more seasoned in chopping up large, intricate samples, I would have manually gone in and sliced up different parts of that sample so that it did fit nicely inside the block, which I will show you how to do that later in the video for track B2. But of course, that all can be solved if you have a MIDI sampler, because those have fine tuning, obviously, but these are strictly Paula tunes, and there really isn't much of a fine tune. Besides that, there really isn't too much else to run down in this one, since it's one of my first meds. I didn't get too crazy with it, just the standard volume and pitch fades, which for context is Command C and Command 1 and 2 respectively.
Oh yeah.
As you can see on block 7, track 3, I've got Command C running down the entire length of the block, starting at the highest value for volume, which is 64, going down to 0 at the bottom, making that break a smooth fade out, aka early volume automation. And for a pitch down example, you can see here on block 17, track 2, I've got Command 2 running down each line, going from value 1 to 5. I do this a lot, as you will see in the coming videos. Okay, and on to track A2 now. This one's entitled Nuys Crew, and the title has nothing to do with the samples, but yeah, inside joke with myself, I guess, really. Starting off with the Soul Pride break, pretty much raw. On block 13, track 1, I've got the main break, which is instrument number 5. And then 4 lines down, I've cut out just the snare of the Soul Pride and reversed it and put that on instrument 7. And then reduce the volume of that with the C command value 20. Now you may be thinking to yourself, wow, this is fucking boring. Why are you explaining this in excruciating detail, Quad? And to that I have to say, I don't know, but I will say that staggered reduced volume plays a crucial part in this tune, especially on the breaks, and has a really cool, like, quote unquote real drummer feel, I guess, just like you can do inside of any DAW with velocity. But as you can see later on in the same block, starting at line 104, I've got instrument 5 and 6 playing off each other with the C commands changing rapidly, so it doesn't just sound like straight marching music scene. And again, later on block 14, track 3, I've got that crash cymbal being played 4 times, but starting out at the reduced volume of 30 and then jumping back to its original volume of 60 every other time, adding a cool swing effect, which, to be honest, I totally copied from Dort's track Aqua on Night Force at timestamp 248. Moving on to block 5, track 0 is running that Rhodes thing, which I genuinely do not remember where I got it from, but it is a little off, which I kind of like, honestly. Okay, on to block 19. Now I had to use the Bonita Apple Bump sample, aka the Ramp Daylight tune, which, if you didn't know, is Roy Ayers' project. This sample was a little tricky. I had to get it as tight as possible, but it still wasn't lining up exactly right in the block. So as you can see on the first line, track 0, I've got the main Ramp sample A playing, but I had to chop it up and put another part of it on instrument L at line 64. Yeah. Here's the waveform for the first part of the sample on A, and then again for L later on, slapping it back in time with the block, and I had to do it a third time on instrument N. And it's a little hard to get what I'm doing without hearing it soloed, but I'm not going to do that because I can't let the people see my faults, you know. But I got it pretty damn tight, and with all the other samples playing, you can't really hear anything getting cut short. I could have re-recorded it, but a sample that big is almost guaranteed to always have a hard time. inside. Anyways, on block 33, if you're wondering how I time stretch those snares, I did it in my S3000 and then I bounced it back into the AMIGA. I've also used ActKaiser a lot in the past. But there is a third way to do a real-time time stretch in OctaMED via the offset command, which I've been using extensively lately. That command, by the way, is 19, but do not do command 9. That's a protractor command, and command 9 inside of OctaMED, as it completely fucks up your project tempo. Don't do it. And for anyone wanting the rundown exactly where the commands go, I will break it down for you on the next tune, so hold tight for that. Come on. Moving on to block 1, I've got another pitch bend down starting at line 40 and on track 3 with the 808 drop, quote unquote, as has been used many times. Before I was any good at the commands, I would have made a bass drop inside of FL Studio and then recorded that in separately, but it's like way cooler to do it inside OctaMED because of the real-time aliasing. And the best way to describe that sound would be like it adds sort of a whistling to the top end of the sub, and it sounds so good on a proper PA. And I've been wondering lately how all the old school guys did bass drops back in the day. Like, I assume that was all like sampler Atari Cubase, which I also have and am getting a lot more familiar with, but there must be some sort of rudimentary pitch automation inside of Cubase that I don't know about yet, but I'm working on it. It's very hard. Right, so on to B1, the rough side of the EP. This track is entitled Herb Man Dub, hence the Herb Man sample extensively being used throughout. Not a ton to say about this tune either, except that it is another old one. Was just looking up, honestly, he was looking to pump out a quick banger, but ended up really liking this tune, as did Scam. And this one uses that D-bridge break. I never remembered what it's actually called, the D-bridge song, but I just know it off the top of my head from that. I never remember what that break is actually called, but tons of guys have used it. I've used it before. I just know it off the top of my head from that D-bridge tune that I spent way too long trying to find on Google, but I did find this one picture of him, and I'm loving the professor vibes that he's got going on. Don't know why he looks like that, but respect. Right and early in the morning. Everybody say Earth man hustling. I know Sergeant Weary is waiting. Everybody say Earth man hustling. Right and early in the morning. Everybody say Earth man hustling. Anyway, yeah, nothing too special about this one. It uses two amens two different amens layered on top of each other, sort of, which is fun. One of the amens is pretty quiet and just rolling, because I've got that time-stretched amen snare rolling over everything, starting at block 15. This was honestly a really fun one to write, because it's kind of simple, and that pad starting at block 18 is used in another big hardcore track, and it's absolutely the most intense choir pad I've ever heard, so I had to rip that. This tune is all lined up really well, and I have another sort of cheat I do before recording everything in, so that the tunes line up as good as possible inside of OctaMED. I'll have an FL project running alongside OctaMED, and I'll essentially mock up a project before writing in OctaMED, i.e. I'll set the project tempo and quantize all my breaks and shit within FL, and then that way if I want to swap out that break or just add another one entirely, I can easily do that, because as stated before, the OctaMED tempo sliders are very crude, and since I'm doing it fully on the AMIGA, I want to have as much control as possible before I'm too far gone in the tune. And also another reason I try to record everything at 20,384 hertz specifically is because techno sound is really finicky, and the root pitch of a sample actually changes depending on what frequency cutoff you set it at. For example, if I were to record a sample that is a loop at 20,384 hertz and then sync that up all good inside OctaMED, but then I want to add another loop, but I accidentally recorded it at like 20,000 hertz, it's going to be slightly slower. So I found that 20,384 is a great middle ground of just enough crust while also having as like accurate as possible pitches within OctaMED. And of course, honestly, this can all be avoided if you just batch convert all your files before importing them to your AMIGA. And a lot of people will just get all their samples ready and then batch convert them to IFF files in Audacity and then load those on a CF card, go into the PCM CIA port on the AMIGA 6 and 1200, and if you're working with an AMIGA 500 or 1000, I believe you could probably load samples onto a GoTech if you have it installed, but do not quote me on that. And as far as emulating goes, I have no clue because my PC's a piece of shit and I can never properly get anything to work. I mean, I got Workbench going, but yeah, it never worked out. Anyways, as mentioned earlier, I will show you where to enter the commands starting all the way on the left. On each of the 4 tracks is the line number, then to the right is the instrument note and octave, then the first 0 here is the instrument, which on track 2 is 6, which happens to be that Bounty Killa Clash sample. Then the 2 zeros to the right is where you enter your command. So if it's command 2, you leave the first 0 at 0, and the second one is 2, duh. And then the last 2 zeros are the values, and since this program is hex, that range can be pretty damn high. Okay, and on to the last tune of the Paula EP. This one is entitled Has Gone Postal, which samples a monologue excerpt from the video game Postal 1, which, to be honest, I've never played, but I have watched a fair amount of playthroughs, and it looks fun. But I've spent most of my Postal time playing the second game, Postal 2, which is a notoriously shit game, but also amazing. Of course, nowadays, I have no time to game anymore, but that's alright. And that first little crunchy, creepy sample is from Postal as well. If you look in track 3, you'll see I have 1 million different bass lines. Okay, on to block 15, I've got the beginning of what is to be like a 1 billion part split for this massive Postal monologue. Actually, starting the sample on line 115, track 3, I timed it just right for that door slam to hit on line 0 for block 16. Coming up right here.
Population pressure and the stress of modern life may cause an increase in...
And then from there, I chopped that initial sample up a bunch of times, as you can see, going from I all the way to N. When importing a really big sample from your hard disk into OctaMED, the program actually cuts off a portion of the audio, so I'm essentially like guessing on where to cut and paste parts of the sample into new instrument slots. And I have a method, but I'm not going to show you guys because that would be an editing nightmare. But basically I spanned this sample over 8 blocks, going in semi-blind, and that's all you need to know.
Wicked. Wicked.
If you're wondering where all those twisted motor revving amen snares come from, that is a secret, but let's just say granular synths are sick. And although for future projects I am trying to stick to as much OctaMED commands and ACI tricks in the box as possible, but sometimes it's cool to garble up some shit in another unit or VST and then dump it into the AMIGA, you know, because that's what you do. It's jungle. Here on block 6, I've got that brandy sample running with the trans effect by starting that on line 96 at full volume, which is C64. And then on line 97, you can see I've cut it off by using the C00 command and just repeating that on and off, and that's how you do that.
We'll have plenty of time to study him.
This one took forever, and there's a ton of amen cuts, and that's why. And that's about it, guys. I think, you know, I hope you enjoyed this little breakdown. I'm sure I missed some stuff because, yeah, I've seen these projects a million times. So something simple that could be like overlooked by me. If you have any questions, ask below. I'm happy to help. But anyways, I hope this was helpful to newcomers, and I hope it was at least entertaining to watch. Just like doing these because it's a cool journey. Cool to show it off, you know? Pick up all the jungling hardware crew, right? Keeping the old school alive. This gear ain't getting any younger, and we've got to maintain not only the hardware, but the old school way. I've got another EP coming up with 2 AMIGA tunes on it, plus lots more releases on Heavy Sounds. So hold tight for all those, guys, and cheers. Thanks for watching. Peace.